All right, ladies and gentlemen, hello, and welcome to another technique workshop. This week, looking at some freestyle and backstroke turns with the one and only Mr. Liam Willcox.
It's me, bro.
These introductions are getting more and more formal.
I need to like walk into shot, don't I?
Yeah, I mean, I need to figure out some extra zoom animations to kind of get like some curtains opening, you know. Unveiling the guest star of the session today.
That's what it needs.
Absolutely. All right, so freestyle backstroke turns are our focus point today, and so we'll move swiftly on and we'll get into it. So just a couple of key facts, and Liam, obviously, if I pause awkwardly at any point, then feel free to fill the space.
Dive in.
we can use hand signals in some way to allow each other to speak a bit more. Right, so just fundamentally in terms of turns, I think we all know this, but it's really key to point out that it's so easy to see the difference of well executed turns and poor executed turns. You know, the main function of turning itself is to simply change direction quickly and maintain speed through the wall. But I don't know if you've got any experiences, Liam, that you'd love to share, or any observations that you have of, you know, how obvious it is when you see the kind of the high and the low of turning.
Missing the wall, scraping your bum on the wall. Yeah, they're the worst ones. I think as well as seeing it as a swimmer, you'll be able to feel it tremendously. If you do it right, you'll know, and if you do it wrong, you'll definitely feel it as well.
Yeah, it takes a lot of time to kind of get that feel, but absolutely, you know, when it works, it works. So I'm going to start moving the camera around a little bit. If anyone at home's watching this and I'm moving the camera, it's because I can't quite see all of the words. The Zoom camera placement is not particularly nice to slideshows like this. So I guess moving forward, you know, just like every other technique that we come up against, that, you know, really it's quite simple in its basic processes. You know, the fundamentals of turning well is actually quite simple. I mean, in this video, we've broken it down into 4 steps. The big difference for me moving forward from that simple process, though, is as you look at the details of some of the little subtle movements or some of the positions that we ask you to look at, it does get a bit more, there's a lot more thought that needs to go into it. So hopefully you can walk away from this today with a simple process of, I need to do this, this, and this, and this. But then with the details, that takes a lot of time to learn. I mean, how do you feel about that, Liam?
Yeah, step by step.
Absolutely.
Yeah, same with everything.
Simple. Simple, stupid. That's what Mike tells me. Keep it simple, stupid.
That's what you need.
There you go. So I mentioned this in the starts video a few weeks ago, but I think it rings true as well for turns. In terms of, you know, all of the turns today, we're just covering free and back, but, you know, across all of them, you know, they're very heavily linked to land and what we do in terms of the S&C program. You know, you require a lot of technique, which is obviously flexibility, mobility of the joints, being stable in your body position. And I kind of added on this time around this real element of consistency with turns. I mean, think about how many turns we do per session. I mean, if you do 1,000 meters, that's already short course, that's already 39 turns, you know, and, you know, you can just exponentially increase that number. And by the end of a season, how many turns have you done and how many have you actually done to the highest level that you can possibly do it? You know, it's we certainly can't be perfect, but I think chasing it and trying to attain it is a good goal to have. So you need to have strength so you can actually generate force off the wall. I mean, I'm going to throw this in there, Liam, but when you hit that wall and you push away, it's basically a jumping action. You know, it's a pretty standard jumping action. But how many times do people really treat it that way, where it's actually this really powerful opportunity and this big explosive movement?
I think it's one thing that's overlooked, because exactly what you said, a lot of people won't push off as hard as they can because they think, oh, it's the underwater phase that's going to make the most difference. But if you have a really strong push off, then that's just going to benefit the underwater phase. So
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's one of them ones which people kind of miss out.
And and like we said at the beginning already, it's the turn is there for change of direction, and you've got an opportunity to drive off a solid object for the only time other than the start in the race. It's an opportunity to really maintain and generate a great amount of force before that underwater. And if you're fast in the streamline, you're going to be fast in the underwater. As long as you do it with great consistency and skill, you're going to be there. So before we move forward, the final point on the slide there is, your ability to have great technique and to maintain speed through a turn. That's going to be the ultimate limit to what you can do with turns as you move forward. If you don't have the technique and you don't focus on how do I keep the speed going through that wall, you're going to have a limit, and you're never going to be as good at turns as you can possibly be. And they're a huge factor. We see it all the time. So there's some key points in terms of developing turns before we move forward. Fundamentally, the key to developing the turn is, great preparation. So understanding how it needs to be done and mastering that skill, and then simply going and practicing it. We talked about that a little bit with the start one, so I won't go too much into it. But I did kind of add this idea of going into skills and having the mindset of seeing it as this great challenge. It's a challenge that is there to be grabbed, and you're trying to thrive on that challenge, and rather than kind of having the mindset of seeing a new skill or maybe a different way of looking at it and backing away from it and seeing it as a threat, if that makes sense. I think mindset has got so much to do with how you go and develop technique and your ability to go and, get it right every now and again, and most likely get it wrong most of the time, but eventually.
When you reflect on it.
Absolutely.
So even from feel to the way it looks, that's what your mind's gonna, process it by.
Absolutely. And that's kind of why I put that last point on the slide there. Like, it's like everything, it takes a lot of time investment and a lot of reflection to master the turns. And Liam's already mentioned the idea of feeling when you do a great turn. It takes time to get that. And, there'll be a lot of turns you won't feel great, but then when, you always say it to the young guys, I've heard you multiple times, when you feel it, you absolutely know.
Yeah.
And then that becomes that standard that you're always trying to achieve and attain from then on. It frustrates everybody.
It's normally like 1 out of, say 100, but then they know what that's like. So
yeah. You almost get this taste in your mouth of, I know what that's like now, and I'm going to chase it. All right, so just got a quick little video. I'm hoping that this is relatively easy to see. I think the last time we did this, it was a little bit stuttery, but this is just an example of a turn from Michael Phelps from London 2012 in the 4x1 free. It's interesting because I actually listened to a podcast the other day, Liam, with Bob Bowman, who was Phelps's coach, and he was actually asked this really kind of simple question as to what was it about Michael Phelps that set him apart from everyone else in his training group. Because I think in 2013 they had some absolute immense athletes in there, like Yannick Angel and I can't remember the Danish girl, the distance freestyler, I can't remember her name. It'll come to me at some point, or maybe Mark Edmondson will let me know. He tends to know these things. But they have this really stacked group, and he was asking what set him apart from even these absolute monster swimmers. And he said something very simple, and it was he never slowed down into a wall, ever. Yeah. He'd get to 5-10 meters out, and he'd just accelerate past everybody. He talked about Yannick Angel doing sets of 50s, going like 23 points from a push. And then Phelps would get in next to him and be right on him. And just right at the end, just the last 5 meters, have this whole other gear just to get into that wall. And it's every time. And he kind of cited that. Absolutely. And he kind of cited that as one of the reasons that Yannick Angel never stayed with him for much longer training, because he just couldn't, there was a certain kind of element to being in that group of people with someone like Phelps. It's almost like Jordan and the Bulls from The Last Dance, if you've had a chance to watch that. It was almost kind of like that level of intensity. Like, how do you train with someone like that? It's obviously going to raise you up, but it's tough. Anyway, so I'll play this video and get it going. That was just
him on the wall.
I know, it's just, I mean, what's interesting there is you can see obviously when he goes in, he's very fractionally in front, but his turn was just so smooth. But it's just that drive off the wall, that acceleration and the power that he gained on that underwater. And one of the biggest things for me that I take away from that, Liam, is that it was all so calm. Like it just looked like another opportunity to do a turn, but it was an Olympic final. And that's kind of at the top of the slide why I put, the idea of mindset plus system plus skill. So, mindset being the way that you approach it and the way that you think about it internally. The system being understanding how you put that technique together, the process. And then the skill of how do you do that under pressure? And it doesn't really get much more pressure than that. I think you put those three things together, the mindset, the system, the skill, and then that's the kind of result that you end up getting. It's pretty
Olympic final turn. That's what you get. That's what you get,
absolutely.
people.
Yeah, against Michael Phelps.
Yeah.
Don't get much better than that. Right. Okay. So moving forward. So it's going to go through the turn. So we're covering freestyle and backstroke turns, obviously. Now, there are certain points in this where we just focus in on the freestyle bit because there's slightly different elements to it. But it's only kind of at the beginning of the turn, at the end of the turn, really. But most of the slides say freestyle and backstroke because it covers it. So I'll make sure we emphasize that. So essentially, what I've done, I've put some basic points on here, and I think what would be great is just us just kind of talking through it, and so I'll run through them, and we can kind of riff off each other as we go, if that makes sense to you.
That's cool.
So, in terms of the approach to freestyle turns and backstroke turns, which is the first kind of part here, is fundamentally, I mean, this kind of overarches the whole thing. You've got to maintain speed through the 5 meter flags and into that wall. The final stroke is your anchoring point as you enter the water for the turn. You're getting that great hand position. You're holding that water strong. You got to make sure that you spot the wall as you go into that final stroke. And this could be actually an interesting point to talk about, Leon. I'm just going to skip forward with some of the images so you can see him already entering there. And on the next one, he's going through there. The idea of spotting the wall, like, have you got any thoughts on that? Because sometimes it can be a little bit of a difficult one for people to pick up.
Personally, I don't really like them looking for the wall. Only purely because we spoke about this just before we did this. His head position there is so high. I preferably like, you'll probably be able to see the far bottom of your head's looking down. But the more you do a turn, and again, it comes down to feel, the more you do the turn, the more the distance you are from the wall. So, we've seen it all the time, younger swimmers, especially swimming it in head really, really high up. They'll get to the last stroke, their eyes will be on the water, and then they'll go into a turn. Whereas, you want to be looking down and just using that to go and hold that momentum into the turn. So, yeah, I'm not, when it comes to spotting the wall, you'll probably see the bottom of the wall, roughly, but you won't, like he is now, he's seeing the whole thing. You could probably see the block if you wanted.
Well, actually, I've just realized this, but this is actually like a clip from the backstroke turn, so there could be something to that he's probably just rotated over, perhaps. But but the point still stands that if you look at if you can see my mouse, you don't want to be looking up towards this portion where the gutter is, and to be honest, even if you're looking towards the top end of the tee there, you're starting to verge into that dangerous territory. Having your eye level down below the tee, and even, to be honest, that bottom edge of the pool, it's just the best. It's going to give you the easiest position to work with. I think just getting your eyes in that position, even if you don't quite submerge the way that you want to, or have your head slide under the way that you want to try and get to, it's going to give you a good position in the first place rather than having that eye level. So that's an interesting one. In terms of spotting, for backstroke, we know that you need to be using the flags to count your strokes. I think that's kind of, again, one of those kind of heavenly things that you just absolutely have to be able to do. Are there any things from that perspective, Liam, that you talk to the young swimmers about, in particular, about how to go about learning that process? Because for some of them, it can be quite challenging and scary to start with.
Yeah, it's just a lot of trial and error. I think when it comes to freestyle turns especially, And, you know, we've done submerged turns with the transition guys a lot. Even getting them used to, even if they miss the wall going into a turn. So they'll swim in training, they'll go down, try and do a submerged turn, and then they'll stretch out and their legs will be miles off, and they'll be like, oh, okay, I'm a little bit too far away. But kind of using the T as a bit of a guidance on the bottom of the pool, to have a play with the distance. And again, if you do a submerged turn right, you're going to get thrown into the wall. So the problem with that is, you know, if you end up, again, we spoke at the start about scraping your bum down the wall. If you turn too late, you're going to scrape your bum down the wall. If you turn too early, you're going to miss it. But it's about maintaining that speed in, so that you roughly know every time where you're going to be hitting your turn to.
Absolutely. And, you know, and we talk about submerged turns a lot, and that's kind of like the final points here on this particular slide. You know, as you're starting to get into that final pull, you know, you can already, you know, you can see his head's definitely, his eye level's much further looking down now by this point, but his head's already, you can clearly see it's submerging. You know, he's submerging his head through the front portion of his stroke, of that final stroke, to really get that head going down. And the final part of the stroke, which is why I wanted to highlight this, is making sure that you really accelerate at the back end of that and press through the hip. Because there's some points kind of as we go forward here where you need to have all of the maximal movement out of those pulls and those rotations that we're going to get into in a second, to make sure that you're actually getting around that wall with some level of smooth, you know, with some smoothness, I guess, if that's even a word. I think I might have just made it up.
Sounds good to me.
Smoothness. There we go. We've coined it.
With finesse.
There we go. Look at that. Finesse. Yeah.
Finesse.
What a word. A finesse. Plural. So just skipping on to the backstroke approach, I've just kind of highlighted some just very subtle differences, obviously, that, you know, we talked about, you know, you're using the flags on backstroke when you come into the turn, but, you know, you're going to be having a rotation as you go through those last couple of strokes to make sure that you can go from your back to your front. But fundamentally, the process is the same. Is there anything that you want to add to that, Liam?
No, just using that rotation. I see a lot of people doing like a full stroke on backstroke and then, you know, using that arm and then turning the head down. It's as that arm's coming over, you know, you're pushing your head, using your arm to basically guide your head into the position you want it to be. And this is one thing I think when it comes to approach on freestyle arm backstroke, that arm that comes over the water that's recovering, you can use that as it's going in to guide your head. So you're pushing it like slightly down towards to go into your submerged turn. And a lot of the swimmers who probably be watching this, I've probably said it to them a few times about, as that arm comes over, using it to push your head down, and they know when they do it wrong because that arm will go in, their head's up, and then they're trying to push down from that position, and it's just awkward and uncomfortable.
Absolutely. And I think one thing we've definitely taken from this already is that Ryan locked his head too high when he turns.
Yeah.
but
he had one job.
To be honest, though, as well, I think this is a good opportunity actually with that to highlight, and I think we may have said this before in a previous technique video, that even with the top level athletes, they've always got stuff that could be better. You know,
definitely.
There's, you know, even, you know, we talked about Phelps already, but even someone like Phelps, he had flaws in his strokes and he had flaws in his turns, but also as well, after, you know, I've spent some time, you know, listening to his coach talk about how he swims. You know, there's always like little subtleties from how people explain it or maybe want to coach it as well. So, you know, it's not about, there's no wrong way or anything like that, but, you know, there's fundamentals that I think you need to hit, but there's always going to be little variations. And, you know, I mean, this might just been an off day for him, or maybe backstroke and freestyle turns aren't his bag.
Yeah.
But I think we know that off the wall, he's definitely a whole nother level. Yeah. So that's the approaches to free and back turn. So moving forward, so this is kind of where we mix the two strokes together, because fundamentally it becomes the same movement. So we're looking at the rotation here. So the kind of the key points that I've put up there for this one is, as you go through through that rotation or into that rotation, and you're going through that pull, the head needs to dip down off the back of that submerged turn to make sure that you're initiating the rotation. And I think having that, I mean, we've talked a lot, Liam, about the hip through to the neck connection on strokes and starts as well. I think even in turns, and you can see it here, that there's a pretty much a nice long line from his hips through to his head, and that whole core unit from the hips through to the neck is working in what is one to drive through and to really initiate a strong drive to get those hips over the top. Now this is one that actually I'll be interested in hearing your thoughts on, because I've always felt this as well, but a very subtle single dolphin kick to kind of help drive you through into the rotation. Now, I said to you before, this is, I worked through some of these areas from the British swimming kind of references in terms of the work that they've done on turns. What do you feel about that?
If you time it right, amazing. If you get it wrong, you kind of look like a fish out of water, just trying to like flop into a turn. So yeah, it's the same with the dives. When we spoke about, as you hit the water, trying to put a little bit of a flick in. If you do too big a flick, you're kind of gonna look like a little kid trying to learn how to do a turn for the first time. But if you get it right, it will benefit you.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it's kind of again, it goes back to feel, but it's kind of them ones where the timing of that is the most important thing.
I was going to bring up that big word for you, that timing.
Yeah,
absolutely. And it's exactly what you kind of finished the whole bit off with starts on as well. That so much of this, once you learn the process, is about how you put it together and what happens in the sequence when, that idea of timing. It's such a big part of it. It's one thing knowing it, how to do it and what it should look like, but yeah, going out there and practice it is a whole nother kettle of fish.
Well, definitely, yeah, on that one.
So just to finish off the other points on the rotation idea. So I think using the core muscles, and I talked about that hip to neck position and using that whole unit to really drive the rotation round and drive the hips over. You got to be using your core muscles and having that nice little pivot in the waist. And if I flick to the next bit, you can see again that you've got that nice long torso position in the hips. And this is actually, Liam, where for me that head position being maybe that a little bit too high, you can see his hips are they're breaking the surface of the water quite a lot. So, and I think that this is potentially a good point to kind of jump in on something that, for you guys watching, when you do little subtle movements, it might not be right then and there that you feel the effects of that or see the effects of it. But that chin position, that may or may not, I'm not going to argue with Ryan Lochte too much, may or may not be a little bit high. The after effect of that is a pretty high hip position where the hips are breaking the water a lot as they go through, which is causing drag.
Yeah.
Fundamentally. Now, while he's got his position, is pretty solid. He's definitely using his core. He's getting a good pivot and bend in the waist. You can see his palms are down, so he's using that force to drive that rotation through even more. As he come, I didn't get another one. You got to tuck the knees up nice and quick and tight as possibly can, because fundamentally the tighter the ball is, the faster it moves. And as you bring it round, and if I quickly switch slides for a second, obviously you end up with the hands above the head. But as you're coming down through and into that streamline position, you can press that water in and keep the body rotating onto that wall all the way through. So even though the arms are by your sides at one point, there are still functions that you can use by pressing that water to bring the hands over. Is there anything that you want to add on to that or jump in with there, Liam?
Just the 2 points about the hips, and again going down to submerged turn. I think some of the kids will know this one as well. When you're doing the turn, and if you're doing it right, your bum will kind of make a glaze on the water, a bit like Phelps's turn. The reason for that is basically all the waves behind you as you're swimming in are going to help you launch you into that wall. So if you're going down, you're getting pushed into the wall, and then as you're pushing off, you're going underneath all the stuff that you've just pushed in. So you're not pushing against all that water. So you're using it and then you're getting away from it. So that's why, him being a little bit high on this one, he's probably going to be bouncing off the wall. It's not going to be the best position for him to leave on. And also with the arms, they're inside his body line. They're not out here. The amount of times, Chris, you see this, the amount of times, kids go into a turn. Yeah. That's a key point right there.
Absolutely. And, I hadn't even thought about that one, but couldn't agree more. You think about it from a fundamental streamlined position. If you were to look at that if you were to be stood around here looking forward into that, the profile of his body would be so thin compared to having those arms out there where your profile then widens to the fingertips. That's actually a really good point there, Liam. I'm going to have to update this thing.
Yeah.
I'll have on the bottom hashtag Liam's knowledge.
Oh, finesse.
Absolutely. There we go. We're bringing it back again. Maybe not the right context, but we're bringing it back.
Oh, I'll take it.
No, but yeah, there was some really good points there. But it is fascinating. I find, like looking at this. I mean, I actually said before we started recording that trying to find a quote perfect submerged turn or video, it's hard because it's one of those things. Sometimes it can be like a unicorn. And we've mentioned this. It happens like once every now and again. It might just be one day in practice or in a race. You might just nail it. And you can't always explain how you've done it sometimes, but it just happens. Because we watch this, we watch these slides here and these images. He's not fundamentally doing it badly, but it's just it's these subtle details that are obviously slightly different. But every turn fundamentally is different, and under pressure as well. And I think this is where if we go back to what I was talking about with that idea of mindset, systems, and skills, being able to do this stuff under pressure. Like even at that level, if he can do this pretty much as he is under pressure, he's probably going to be better than most, because most people will crumble under that. Clearly, I imagine that Phelps or Lochte, for example, would train a lot under pressure. Right, so planting on the wall. So key little points that I made note of there is planting the feet with the balls of the feet, so right on the front. I mean, I don't know about how you feel, Liam, but I've seen people go to the heel and it don't look pretty. It's the most uncomfortable looking and feeling position you could possibly be in on a wall. You never want to have your whole foot planted flat on the balls of the feet. It's almost like it's like the best runners in the world. They run on the front of their feet. They don't put their heel down as heavily.
More spring.
Absolutely. It's so much easier to drive off the back of that. You're taking the speed in and speed out. And kind of one of the variations that you do see is foot planting position. So, I've kind of noted there that anywhere from vertical to 45 degrees tends to be some of the things that I see. But one of the major mistakes we do tend to see from my perspective is when you've rotated around the wall, and you'll see young kids do this, they turn directly onto their front because they're desperate to get onto their front so they can push away. So their feet end up pointing downwards. Yeah. So, sometimes, it depends on who you are, really. Some people prefer the vertical position. For me, I'd be more 45 degree on an angle so I can then drive away, and I'm already initiating that idea of rotating my body, which we'll get to in a second. When you hit the wall, you've got a nice 90 degree angle on the hips and the knees there, ready to drive away off the wall, because that's what, that plant position, it's about getting ready to push away and make sure that you can get the force to do that. If your butt's right on the wall, that's going to be tough to get force and get moving quickly. If your legs are too straight, there's going to be almost zero force going off through that wall. And obviously your hands are coming together there into the streamline. So is there anything on that kind of planting there, Liam, that you want to touch on or throw in there?
I think for me, it's the angle as well of the body. So, and I'm not roasting up Lochte here on this one, but I got a feeling this turn was done quite slowly, just to show each point kind of on the turn, because he's quite close to the surface. Now, if you're sprinting and there's not much waves around him, so if he was sprinting in, there's gonna be a good amount of waves. So I would say, when your hips to your shoulders, like through the neck, like you've been saying, you kind of want it to be slightly angled down. You don't want to be flat. and you don't want to be put like that, because from there, if you push, you're gonna have to go like that. Whereas if you're down, you're pushing down, gradually coming back up.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it's just the angle of from the hips to the shoulders, just a little bit more down for me.
And again, this is a backstroke turn that this image is from as well. So, you know, and when we get to the last slide, he does push off straight onto his back. So he's not doing his side kick that he was doing, which correct me if I'm wrong. They banned the technique, didn't they?
I think so, yeah.
Because he was pretty much on his dead on his side, or rotated slightly round to his front. And then, no, it wasn't the backstroke turn, it was the freestyle turn. When he started his underwater on his back, and then he rotated around.
Yeah.
I think that's how we did it.
Yeah, the rules be changing left, right, and centre.
Yeah. It's kind of like, I mean, I don't know whether you follow Formula One, but it's like Formula One when another team spots something they don't like, they complain about it, and then it gets changed. Not all the time, but a lot of the time. And it's kind of like, well, if everything has to be exactly the same, then it kind of for me, it takes a lot of the personality out of it. You know, I mean,
it was a bit like the fly kick and the breaststroke pull down. Like the amount of conversations people had about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're adding something that can, I mean, breaststroke pull out, you can do it before, you can do it during. You know, there's variation there, and you can tweak it and play with it. But yeah, I think, you know, when Lochte, for example, was doing something different, well, I think what was disappointing from my perspective was that immediately it was crushed. It's different. Yeah. No, we don't like it. It's like, oh, you know, the guy is going to beat everyone underwater anyway. You know, there's not many people that would be able to touch him underwater. You know, and there's a lot of people as equal, but you know, yeah. So, I mean, fundamentally, the way you plant on that wall, it's going to have a huge effect on then what comes after, which is, if I click on the right thing, which is obviously the drive. Now, this is the image again from the backstroke turn. So again, I think you're right, Liam. He probably was doing it slow to make sure that it had full effect. So we can probably forgive him for that.
Yeah.
Although we can email him and say, found some points that you could work on.
Yeah. Nah, you carry on that one. I'll sit that one out.
Yeah, that'll be fun, wouldn't it? Yeah. So off the drive, you know, the key points that I put here is, you know, the legs need to drive through the balls of the feet, because we talked about planting the wall on the wall from the balls of the feet. The arms and the legs need to be extended into a great streamline, and I mean, you can fundamentally see that from him already on his backstroke position. Sure, I thought he had a freestyle one there for a second. Well, that was kind of the freestyle one, but he's on his side. But you can see fundamentally there. Yeah, you can see the streamline position there. You know, depending on what stroke you're doing on this, because of the angle he planted his feet, he's pushing straight off onto his back, so he doesn't have to worry about the rotating onto his back because he's already there. But based on what we kind of briefly spoke about there, Liam, I think for me, a slightly more 45-degree planting angle is better, to push off a little bit more on your side and then use the body length and rotation to rotate onto your back as you go through the underwater phase. I mean, because in my mind, you push off a little bit more on your side. Again, thinking about it from a profile perspective, if you were to look at it dead on, your body will be much thinner than it is flat in the shoulders being out, you know. But it's also why you got to be careful walking that fine line of that 90-degree position on your side when you're underwater as well. So, you know, good example there, I think, of just that great drive into the streamline. Next one there, you can see, you know, this is a freestyle turn. He's pushed off, he's rotating round. And the biggest thing for me that I want to put across when you go from a side position as you push off onto your front is that the body has got to do it in unison. You know, you're using your momentum, you're using your core strength to rotate from your side round onto your front through that underwater phase without twisting yourself or without making sudden jerking motions. Because that's something I've definitely seen young swimmers do, that if they don't push off on their front, where they've turned basically there to drive away, they try and twist really aggressively, and those aggressive movements will cause you to slow down quite a lot. And then just put the backstroke one there as well. You can see that backstroke position. So, yeah.
Streamline's good.
It absolutely is. Yeah, well, yeah. After all, we've apparently ripped them apart. So
Yeah.
there you go, sir. This wasn't intentional, by the way, guys,
Yeah.
at all. This is just Liam getting brutal. Clearly,
Well, little details,
absolutely. Yeah.
little
So
details.
that kind of wraps it up, I guess. It's kind of weird. It's like what we talked about with fly kick a couple of weeks ago. That it's almost bizarre that the process is so simplistic.
Hmm.
You kind of get to the end of this, you go, oh, 4 steps for a turn, but fundamentally that's kind of what it comes down to. But like we mentioned at the beginning, the devil is in the detail. It's the
Yeah.
details that kind of take you to the next level of performance of your turns. Master the fundamentals for me as a young athlete. Understanding the approach, the rotation, how to planting your feet the best way for you, driving off with great power and streamline. Get that right first, and then you can start delving into all these little bits like, the hands pressing through into the streamline and all of that, because it's things that you don't want to be thinking about.
Hmm.
When you're competing, you're not thinking about what your hands are doing necessarily. You're thinking about racing. And I think
It's just using the key points as well to, like what we said about when the arm comes over, using that to help get your head down, not having your head up. Like simple little things like that. If you go into the wall, your head up, then the rest of it is not going to be that great. You're going to probably be in the wrong position as your feet land on the wall. So it's like you said, it's really simple, but you can really go into that the details, the little points, and it's step by step. Which when you do a race, and I've said this to some of the younger ones, especially when you swim a race, like 50 meters, you may be doing it in 27, 28 seconds, but you've still got time to think about every step, every little detail. So like position, like even when you're doing a dive, position on the block, the drive, the flight, the entry, the underwater, the breakout, the swim, the approach to the turn, like every little thing, you'll have time to do that in your head.
Absolutely. I mean, in kind of the big point for me, then I mentioned it earlier, is that you watch you watch the slides, or you watch that video of Phelps or whoever, you watch any elite level swimmer when it comes to any skill. Let's just use turns like we have been. It's so controlled. There's nothing overly aggressive about it. It's smooth. It looks like it's flowing from one bit to the next, and it's too easy to go into panic drive mode and start throwing things around, throwing arms over, jabbing fingers into the water too rapidly and too deep, and shortening kicks and not holding streamlined positions and rushing your underwater because you need some breath, some air. It's all of those things of in the training pool, taking the opportunities to try and do it as smoothly as you can. You need to do it at speed, absolutely, but I think you need to learn how to do it with massive control. Control is, to me, it's almost kind of like the buzzword of all of that.
100%.
Because you don't get anywhere by thrashing. I think we've all learned that by now. So some turns. Yeah, don't think we've got much more to say on this right now, but I'm sure we could go so much more in depth. I think next week, Liam, we're gonna delve into the beauty of breaststroke and fly turns. I know, right? That's a little snapshot.
Beautiful stuff.
Yeah, same slideshow. It's all the same.
Yeah, just a few differences, but yeah.
Yeah, right. No, but yeah, again, it's another great opportunity. And what was really good is that I got a lot of kind of requests for this for turns. Not just from the swimmers, from parents too. But kind of what I want to finish on with this is, it's great that everyone wants the info.
Oh,
but
definitely.
There's nothing that we've said today that we haven't talked about fundamentally in a training session. And I think that's important to remember, that it's good downloading and looking for more detail, but if you're not getting the fundamentals right, and we don't say it for the good of our health, and we say it because it is fundamentally a simple process, but take the information and then put it into practice and take one step at a time.
And if it does go wrong when you're doing your turns, or actually practicing it, you reflect on it and break it down into the steps.
Absolutely. Identify the area and then try and close that gap again.
Yeah.
And there's a whole skill to that. To be fair, that's a whole video in itself. But I'll save that one.
That's mindset. Next presentation, mindset.
There we go. Performance mindset. There we go. See, we've got this all planned out, guys. It's all good.
Yeah.
All right, Liam. Well, thank you very much for your time and going through those turns with me. And we'll come back together next week for those flying breaststroke ones.
Let's do it.
Yeah, and then we can nervously anticipate the back to breast crossover turn the week after.
Oh, here we go.
Everyone's favorite.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for watching. If you've come this far with us, and again, thanks to Liam, and we'll see you next week.